Imagine for a moment holding a belief. I mean, one that's really fundamental to you, something you've championed, maybe even, build a whole community around. What would it actually take for you to change your mind, to face evidence that just, well, completely shatters your whole perspective? Today, we're taking a deep dive into a pretty extraordinary real-world story. It's about Jeran Campanella. Now, for years, Jeran was a really prominent advocate for the flat Earth idea. He was totally convinced our planet was like a flat disk surrounded by this giant ice wall. And right at the heart of his belief was this major sticking point, Antarctica. He argued it just couldn't possibly have 24-hour sunlight, the midnight sun phenomenon. Why? Because, well, it fundamentally clashed with the flat Earth model he believed in. So Jeran made this incredibly bold decision. To prove his theory, he literally put his money where his mouth was. He invested a pretty significant amount of cash to travel to Antarctica himself on an expedition he actually called the Final Experiment.
Right. And that's what we're going to unpack in this deep dive. We'll look at the flat Earth model Jeran subscribed to and explore exactly why the midnight sun is, well, such a critical problem for it. We'll follow Jeran's own personal journey, his transformation. We also need to debunk a common myth about Antarctica while we're at it. And ultimately, we want to see what his story teaches us about belief itself, about science, observation, and honestly, the guts it takes to admit you might have been wrong.
Okay, let's get into it. We've looked at accounts from the expedition itself, explanations of these flat Earth models, and also the details of relevant international treaties. So to really get where Jeran was coming from, we need to understand the basics of the flat Earth model he followed. It pictures the world as essentially a flat plane. And crucially, it's bordered at the edge by what they often call a huge ice wall, which in this view is basically Antarctica, right? Just stretched out around the rim.
Exactly. And what's fascinating here is the level of conviction behind these ideas. For many flat earthers, this isn't just some abstract theory. It feels like a fundamental truth. They often use a specific map projection, the azimuthal equidistant map. You've probably seen it.
Yeah, the one with the North Pole at the center.
That's the one. And Antarctica isn't a continent at the bottom. It's smeared out into this massive ice ring around the entire edge of the disk. The big issue, though, is that this map just doesn't hold up when you compare it to, actual real-world observations and measurements. It fails pretty profoundly.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting. Like you said, we know that in reality, on our globe Earth, Antarctica experiences the midnight sun. Periods where the sun is visible 24/7. So for a flat earther like Jeran was, why is that specific thing such a huge, huge problem for the theory?
Well, if we connect this back to that map, that azimuthal projection, 24-hour daylight all the way around Antarctica is just fundamentally incompatible with it. Think about it. On a flat disk, for the sun to light up that entire outer ring continuously for a whole day, it basically breaks the rules of geometry and how light works.
It would have to be everywhere at once, almost, along that edge.
Pretty much, or moving in a way that just doesn't make sense. But on a spherical Earth, it's straightforward. The planet's tilt on its axis explains it perfectly. During the Antarctic summer, the South Pole is tilted towards the sun, so it gets continuous daylight. The midnight sun is a totally predictable result of our planet's shape and tilt. A flat Earth model, especially that specific map, simply can't account for that sustained circular illumination around the pole. It's a direct contradiction.
Which leads us right back to Jeran's, well, really audacious decision. He spent over $35,000 of his own money. That's a massive personal investment to join this final experiment trip to Antarctica. And just to be crystal clear, his stated goal, his only reason for going, was to gather the evidence he needed to prove the flat Earth theory was correct. I mean, that's not just debating online, is it? That's putting everything on the line: money, reputation, time, the sheer audacity of it.
It really is. And then came the actual experience, the pivotal moment. Jeran Campanella down there in Antarctica on the expedition, seeing the 24-hour daylight, witnessing the midnight sun for himself.
So what happens then? When a belief that's so core to your identity, something you've publicly championed, just smacks right into undeniable firsthand evidence, what did that do to Jeran?
Yeah, you can imagine. That direct observation, it had this profound shattering impact. It wasn't just like, oh, I got a fact wrong. His entire framework, his beliefs were basically dismantled by what he saw. And his journey really shows how deeply, our identities can get tangled up with our belief systems. For him, it wasn't just about correcting a scientific misunderstanding. It took, frankly, immense personal courage to confront that, challenge the foundations he'd built, and then importantly, to admit publicly that he was wrong, especially with a following. That takes real fortitude.
Absolutely. Now, Connected to all this, there's a common misconception you sometimes hear, often linked to flat Earth ideas.
Yeah.
It's this notion that Antarctica is somehow off limits, like it's forbidden territory the public can't go to.
Right, and that raises an important point about how misinformation can, spread and stick around. It's crucial to counter that myth directly. There's the Antarctic Treaty, signed back in 1959. It explicitly states that Antarctica is dedicated to peace and science.
So it's open for research.
Exactly. Scientific research, peaceful purposes. It is absolutely not forbidden territory. People go there all the time. Scientists, tourists, even independent expeditions like the one Jeran joined. I mean, his own trip is direct proof that you can go there. The idea that it's locked down is just, well, false. And Jeran's whole story, it really speaks to these bigger themes, doesn't it? It's such a powerful example of how even really deeply entrenched alternative theories can start to fall apart when they're tested against solid, real-world evidence. Empirical evidence.
Yeah.
It kind of underscores the whole process of science, that self-correcting mechanism.
And that, for me, that's the really critical lesson here. Genuine growth, real understanding often happens when we're actually willing to put our own cherished beliefs to the test, even when it's uncomfortable, or maybe even hurts our pride a bit. This story is fundamentally about searching for truth, isn't it?
Yeah.
Even when that truth forces a total rethink of what you thought you knew.
Precisely. This deep dive really highlights the just undeniable power of direct observation, of empirical data. Seeing is believing, sometimes quite literally. Science doesn't just exist in theory. It proves itself out there in the real world through what we can actually observe, measure, and experience.
So Jeran's story is this incredible, powerful reminder, isn't it, about the impact of direct experience and also the real courage it takes to let go of those deeply held ideas when you're faced with evidence you just can't deny.
Yeah, it's a testament to that process. True knowledge often requires us to challenge our own assumptions. The flat Earth model, particularly that azimuthal map, it just cannot explain things we can clearly observe, like 24-hour daylight in Antarctica. Jeran Campanella saw that firsthand. And as we said, the fact he could even go there confirms Antarctica isn't some forbidden zone under the 1959 treaty.
It really makes you think, doesn't it? Jeran's story is a powerful prompt. What deeply held belief might you be willing to test? What would it actually take for you to embark on your own kind of final experiment to find out what's really true? Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.